Miami Hurricanes are hiring a new defensive backs coach. Does Zac Etheridge check off all the boxes?
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I am Alex Donno, University of Miami alumnus, co-host of Locked On ACC, and writer for Canes County at Rivals. And thank you so much to the everydayers for making Locked On Canes your first listen, or maybe today your second or third listen of the day. We've been busy. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this loaded episode, we'll talk about Miami's defense and how things are obviously trending up after a tough 2024 season on D. Does Miami's new defensive backs coach, does he check off all the boxes? I'll talk about my criteria and how Zac Etheridge, how he stacks up with all of that stuff. So, yeah, the news broke early afternoon here on Tuesday, first reported by Matt Zenitz of CBS Sports and 24/7 Sports, that the Miami Hurricanes appear to be finalizing a hire of former Houston Cougars and former Auburn Tigers defensive backs coach Zac Etheridge. Miami is reportedly hiring him away from Houston. Now, at the time that I'm speaking to you, the hire has not been 100% finalized, just with the protocol stuff, dotting the I's, crossing the T's, the routine background check and all that comes with that. But it appears that Zac Etheridge is going to be the guy, and he is the newest member of the Miami Hurricanes coaching staff. And the first thing that is it's hilarious about this. I think it's a good hire. We'll talk about it, but it's funny to me how Mario Cristobal, he's so secretive when it comes to these coaching searches. You think about the last couple of weeks, ever since Miami hired Corey Hetherman, a defensive coordinator, which is a name that almost nobody was talking about. And then the DB's job comes open shortly thereafter with Chevis Jackson leaving for Wake Forest. And then we've talked about so many different names of possible DB coach candidates. I didn't hear anybody bring up the name of Zac Etheridge. And that doesn't mean it's not a good hire. I think the reason why none of us brought up Etheridge, I mean, A, Mario Cristobal runs his coaching searches like CIA interviews. And B, I don't think any of us knew that Etheridge was available or looking for other jobs, because he, it's not like he was let go. He was not only still working and is still working probably until, this gets finalized for the Houston Cougars, but he had just received a bump up in title and promotion there, kind of like Corey Hetherman had just done at Minnesota. So, and I know some people are like, who's this guy? We're learning about, you guys are all learning about him. We're all learning about him together today, but I know some of the reaction was like surprise, but I don't think that takes anything away from the quality of this hire. It just goes to show you that a lot of times when we're talking about these Mario Cristobal-led coaching searches, it ends up being somebody that nobody expects. Now, in this case, I believe that identifying your defensive backs coach, collaboration between Mario Cristobal and, of course, your new defensive coordinator, Corey Hetherman, that he has found someone he believes will coach defensive backs in a way that fits his scheme and his style of defense, which is very important because, of course, the marriage you have here between DB's coach and defensive coordinator, there has to be harmony, there has to be synergy. So hopefully that gets achieved here. And then when it comes to Mario Cristobal finalizing hires, one of the most important things is you've got to find somebody who you believe in as a recruiter, because we know being a strong recruiter is really non-negotiable when you work on a Mario Cristobal staff, because the expectations there are very high. So here's a little bit more about Zac Etheridge, who Miami is hiring away from the Houston Cougars, their former DB's coach, who's now going to be serving that role. And by the way, he may not be the only DB's coach. We'll get to that. But here's a little bit more about Zac Etheridge. So he actually was in his second successful stint at Houston, had worked at Houston previously. Between his stops for Houston, he had worked 3 seasons as the Auburn defensive backs coach, safeties coach most specifically. He's a former Auburn safety. That's his alma mater. And before he left Auburn, he had just been promoted his final couple seasons there to associate head coach. So he had associate head coach title to go along with coaching DBs there at Auburn. And Etheridge spent this past season, 2024, back at Houston after 3 seasons at Auburn. And like I mentioned, he had just gotten a promotion, or at least a bump up in title there. He added defensive passing game coordinator to his DB's coach title. Here's some of the numbers for the Houston Cougars passing defense last year. And they were successful on the field, Houston's defense, specifically in stopping the pass. Houston limited opponents to just 188.8 passing yards per game. That ranked third in the Big 12. We'll talk about their overall ranking in a second. They only gave up the entire season 2,266 passing yards. That was the fewest in a non-COVID season in 30 years at Houston, going back to 1994. Houston held opponents under 225 passing yards 9 times out of, 12, 13 games, which ranked 15th nationally. And they intercepted passes in 8 of their 12 games played. I think they had 12 interceptions on the season, which is very good. They had 3 interceptions in a game against Baylor on November 23rd, which ranked tied for 5th most nationally by a Power 4 program on the season with their interceptions. So I mentioned Houston, their defense, passing defense ranked 3rd in the Big 12. They ranked 28th nationally, which is very good, very respectable in fewest passing yards allowed. For reference, Miami ranked about 30 spots below that last year with Chevis Jackson coaching the corners and Lance Guidry coaching the safeties. Miami ranked 57th in passing defense last year. Houston ranked 28th. That was 2024 at Houston. During Zac Etheridge's final season at Auburn, that was 2023, they had the nation's number 15 best coverage grade. This is, I think this stat is from Inside the U that posted this. They had the nation's 15th best coverage grade at 89.7. They only trailed Alabama and Georgia in the SEC. That's according to Pro Football Focus. This past year at Houston, had one of the most successful corners in the country, Jeremiah Wilson. He emerged as one of the best in college football this past fall. Wilson finished as the 6th highest graded cornerback in the country with an 86.7 grade per Kane Sport. He finished with 4 interceptions, which was 3rd best in the Big 12. So as far as Zac Etheridge becoming a DB's coach at Miami, I talked about whether or not he checks off my boxes. And obviously, you don't know for sure how good a hire is going to be until you actually see, the results on the field. I get it. I know we were kind of excited about Chevis Jackson last year, and that didn't really work out. But I would strongly argue that Zac Etheridge has a much stronger resume coming in than what Chevis Jackson had coming in to Miami. So there are 3 important boxes that this hire checks off, in my opinion, when it comes to hiring a DB's coach, a position coach. So first thing on Etheridge, wherever he's been, the unit that he coaches, the defensive backs and or the safeties, wherever he's been, the unit he coaches has produced results, positive results, always been, near the top of the country or respectable in the rankings. So he checks off that box. Another box he checks off, he has a proven track record for developing players into NFL draft picks. That's 2. Number 3 for me, and I've mentioned how important this is for a Mario Cristobal staff. He is considered, Etheridge, to be a successful and energetic recruiter, which is obviously something you always need. Zac Etheridge is 36 years old. He played on Auburn's 2010 national championship team. So he's got, championship level experience as a player as well. He is a safety on that team, the Cam Newton year when they won a national title. And my understanding is that, not only is Etheridge considered to be a good and energetic recruiter, he's also pretty familiar with recruiting South Florida, which of course is going to be his bread and butter here. So you talk about, developing NFL draft picks. We'll talk a little bit more about that because Matt Zenitz from CBS Sports put out a really good list of players that Etheridge has coached who went to the NFL and were drafted. And then also a list of some really good players, not all of them defensive backs, some other parts of the defense that Etheridge recruited out of high school to show you that track record as well. So I really like this move for Miami. We'll also talk about, are there any players from the Houston defense that may be enticed to rejoin their position coach in the transfer portal in a few months? You want to keep it locked right here, guys. We're only getting started on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. Super Bowl 59 is here. One game Two teams, endless possibilities, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, which is so much fun, national anthem as well. How long is that song going to go? FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. The live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field, by the way, and the app is super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl, yeah, that's the icing on the cake. Download the app or head to fanduel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's fanduel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59. Folks, this episode is also proudly brought to you by Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back, and then waiting, wondering, and worrying some more. Now, Taxes is matching you with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes their full undivided attention as they work on your return, while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find you every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. Also, you can get the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, no worrying, and no wondering. Guys, this now is Taxes. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service. Real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. Thank you for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. For your next listen, folks, I mentioned we've already done 2 other episodes today. We had an awesome interview, Bruce Warner, the truth teller, and I, with Sports Hall of Famer and College Football Hall of Famer Darren Smith, an all-time great Miami linebacker. That episode is available today. And I also had an episode where I broke down Miami's 2025 football schedule. They got 8 home games this year. I like that. Miami, what I don't like is 2 bye weeks within a 3-week span. Like, were they drunk when they came up with that? So we talk about all the good, the bad, the interesting, and the ugly from Miami's football schedule. We had that on another all-new episode of Locked On Canes. But we're talking now about the new defensive backs coach, Zac Etheridge, who is being hired. That hire is being finalized reportedly by the University of Miami. He spent this past season with the Houston Cougars, and their defense ranked 27th in the country against the pass, 3rd in the Big 12 against the pass. He's gotten results wherever he's been, did a really good job at Auburn. In fact, I reached out to the GOAT, Locked On Auburn host, Zach Blackerby, who does an incredible job. And, I asked Zach, hey, what did you think of Etheridge when he was coaching the DBs at Auburn? He said, didn't want to lose him. Great recruiter, solid coach. So that's now coming down to the University of Miami with Zac Etheridge. So here are this note from Matt Zenitz of CBS Sports. These are among the players that Etheridge has coached who went on to be drafted in the NFL. 2022 second-round pick Roger McCreary, 2022 third-round pick Marcus Jones, 2022 fourth-round pick Damarian Williams, 2024 draft picks Nehemiah Pritchett, DJ James, and Jalen Simpson. And most recently, one of the best players that Zac Etheridge just coached with the Houston Cougars, Jeremiah Wilson, star corner who ranked 3rd in the Big 12 in interceptions this season with 4. And Jeremiah Wilson is actually still in college. We'll talk about him in a second. Here's a note on Etheridge's recruiting from Gabby Urrutia at Inside the U. He says, Etheridge was the primary or secondary recruiter for 19 blue-chip prospects throughout 3 seasons at Auburn. Notable additions were defensive end Keldrick Falk, where he was the primary recruiter, freshman All-American cornerback Jay Crawford, he was the secondary recruiter, and defensive back Keontae Scott, he was the primary recruiter for. So it also, in adding this hire, we've been talking for weeks about who's going to be the next Miami DBs coach. Is this it for that? Because we still don't know yet when it comes to the structure of Miami's defensive coaching staff, because they have seemingly 3 spots left to fill. Miami lost one of their defensive line coaches, Joe Salavea, to Arizona. Miami lost their linebackers coach to Mizzou, Coach Derek Nicholson. And of course, they lost their former defensive backs coach, Chavis Jackson, and also Lance Guidry, the former defensive coordinator, used to focus on the safeties while Jackson focused on the cornerbacks. So with Corey Hetherman, now the defensive coordinator, he's been a linebackers coach in previous stops. So maybe and probably Corey Hetherman is going to double as the linebackers coach. But will Miami hire 2 defensive backs coaches? So the Zac Etheridge thing, it's going to happen. It's trending in that direction here that he's going to be added to Miami staff. So the question is Etheridge going to be the only DB's coach, or is he going to focus on the safeties? And is Miami still going to either bring in or maybe promote somebody from within to focus on the cornerbacks? So is Etheridge going to be the only defensive backs coach? And obviously there's going to be some collaboration there because analysts are allowed to do hands-on coaching now. So it's not as if he's going to be out there by himself, but will Miami add another defensive backs coach? And if they were to do that, with Etheridge having more of a background with safeties, he would probably focus on safeties and someone else focus on cornerbacks. So we don't actually know for sure yet if Etheridge is going to be the only defensive backs coach hired. There still technically could be another one added to that. When it comes to, we talk about how Miami's defense, it seems like it can only go up from where it was last year, especially when it comes to the defensive backfield. And now Zac Etheridge is going to have a lot of talent to work with in the DB room. You've got a returning standout like O.J. Frederick, who had a rock-solid year as a true freshman last year. Xavier Lucas transfers in from Wisconsin. He had a really good true freshman season up there. Charles Brantley, experienced corner, transfers down from Michigan State. Emmanuel Carnley from Arizona. Ethan O'Connor from Washington State. Zachariah Poyser, who was a star safety from Jacksonville State. He comes down, could project out to be a starter. Miami returns Zaquan Patterson from last year, heading into his second year. Damari Brown heading into his third season. Miami also, I don't know what the status is like for Jadis Richard. He'll probably miss most of the season because he tore his ACL, unfortunately for him, late in the year. But he's in that room. You've got some talented freshmen coming into that room. So there is going to be talent for Etheridge to work with in that defensive backfield. And I certainly like the aggressive philosophy of defensive coordinator Corey Hetherman. Miami's DB room has had a complete transformation from players up to coaching. So I'm looking forward to seeing how all of that transpires. And he also, there is going to be another transfer portal opening in April, mid-April. And will there be any more possible additions to Miami's DB room? Because there are some notable players that Zac Etheridge has just coached that you have to wonder about. Would they have any willingness or any longing to follow their former position coach down to South Florida? I mentioned the name earlier, cornerback Jeremiah Wilson, who was one of the standout players in the entire country at Houston this past year. He had actually briefly entered the transfer portal last month and ended up withdrawing from the portal. So he decided to stay in Houston, but I don't know if wanting to keep playing for Etheridge was part of that decision. If he really wants to play for Coach Etheridge, maybe he can do it now at Miami if he decides to enter the portal. Another one of the top players that Etheridge has coached in recent years, Auburn safety Keontae Scott. He just transferred to Houston 2 weeks ago to reunite with Etheridge, who coached him at Auburn and then wanted to be coached by Etheridge at Houston. So I wonder about that one as well. And, I know the transfer portal is wild these days, but I mean, we saw plenty of players last year transfer to one place in December or January and then transfer somebody somewhere else in April. So, I mean, it's possible. I wonder, if Miami wants to add another top safety to their room, if Keontae Scott had already made that decision to follow Etheridge from Auburn to Houston, maybe he wants to follow Etheridge from Houston to Miami. So those are certainly some things to think about here as Miami finalizes their staff. And as I mentioned, there's still a couple moves to be made defensive coaching staff wise. I'm not surprised that we're really seeing it come together this week, because this coming weekend is going to be another gigantic recruiting weekend, because Miami is hosting a lot of 2026 prospects for junior day. So it's going to be a big recruiting weekend coming up. And you really, when you're, interviewing players and doing your film sessions and having your chats, you want to have as many of your position coaches on board as possible. So Miami's got another one on board with Zac Etheridge. The hire is being finalized as we speak. Welcome to the U, Coach Etheridge. Thank you guys so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. Make sure you smash that like button, hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your pods. Couple of shout outs. Shout out to my wife, Rebecca. It's our 13th anniversary today. So the fact that she's put up with me for 13 years, it's shocking. It truly is shocking. So shout out to her and happy anniversary. And shout out to the truth teller. So we had an episode earlier today with the truth teller and College Football Hall of Famer Darren Smith. And as of this morning, when we did that episode, Bruce was still waiting on his MRI results. He has since gotten those, and it came back clean. He was, worried a little bit about, potential early onset dementia. He does not have it. His test results are completely clean, which is awesome. So congratulations to the truth teller. Thank you guys so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. We'll talk to you next time on another episode right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.